This is why you're horrible. This is why everyone hates you. And this is why I'm here. You made me necessary.
Jim Starlin, Jim fucking Starlin, is going to be here on this piece of shit show. Hey, basket cases, friends and enemies alike, mostly enemies. Um, so somehow I managed to persuade a figure from my adolescence whose stories in the comic book medium had a profound effect on me. He wrote The Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, Infinity Crusade, all that cosmic epic stuff that is now taking center stage in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think he created the Thanos of Titan character, and he emphasized his romantic preoccupation with the female embodiment of death. And he also took Jack Kirby's Adam Warlock character to unprecedented new heights of creativity. Adam Warlock was just a Frankenstein type monster born from a cocoon until Jim Starlin got his mitts on him and had him ascend to godhood in the 1970s Warlock Chronicles. Fascinating stuff. I'm also going to ask him about his dealings with Batman in the 80s when the Jason Todd version of Robin, his fate was put up the vote of the audience, and the audience overwhelmingly voted for Robin to die, and Starlin obliged. I'm going to get into all that with him. I don't really have too much else to say this week because it's Jim fucking Starlin. And I mean, I don't want to scare him away before we've even done the interview. So I'm going to keep my word sparse this week and just get right into the meat of the discussion with the creator of Thanos and why he has left Marvel once again. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce a writer and an artist who had a great influence on my adolescence. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, it's Jim Starlin, who created the Thanos and the Thanos character, who is probably one of the most recognizable characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe today. And wow. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, and welcome to and hello to everybody out there.
Okay, this is pre-recorded, so, and don't worry, I'll edit that out as well. But first off, how long have you worked in comics? Since the 70s, right?
I think it was around 72 I started, or 71. 72, I think it was. It was sometime around April. I came in and I had sold a couple of jobs to Joe Orlando over at DC, so I started off at DC and not at Marvel, as most people think. The two-pagers I sold to Joe didn't get printed until long after my Marvel work started coming out. Then having sold those, I decided to throw two suitcases together, head off to New York, got to the bus station in New York, set the suitcase down, which was loaded with comic reference that I needed, or I felt I needed. And some nice gentleman came along and decided he was going to help me carry my luggage. And obviously planning on running off with it, he picked up the wrong suitcase and nearly herniated himself. So I ended up having to haul that all up by myself.
What went into creating the Thanos character? Was that the mid '70s when that happened? And did he really begin as a character homage to Darkseid?
I think I said something like that one time, but the truth of the matter is, if he's anything, he's sort of a ripoff of Mentor. If you've ever seen my original drawing that I did before I ever started working for Marvel, he looks more like Mentor than he does with Darkseid. Though when we did his first drawing, when he first appears in Iron Man, he looks a bit like Darkseid at that point. I don't think I was really going for that. I remember Royce had bulked him up a little bit when I showed him the drawings I had of Thanos beforehand. But like I said, if I was going for anything, it was Mentor. But I think somewhere along the line, I kidded about being Darkseid, and it stuck. So if that's the way folks think, that's the way folks think.
Now, did you actually create the character, or did you revamp him from Jack Kirby like you did with Warlock?
No, I created Thanos. I had him all set up before I ever actually started working at Marvel. I pretty well plotted out that first Iron Man. George Tufka, who had been the regular artist on it, had to go for an operation or so, and so they asked me to come in for a couple issues. Started off with Mike Friedrichs, and Mike scripted it. After that, the next issue of Iron Man, I worked with Steve Gerber, and we did a more humorous Iron Man story, which case Stan saw it, hated it, and both Steve and I got fired for the job.
Wait, so you were fired from Marvel?
We were fired from our assignment.
Oh.
Stan never said never use him anymore, but Roy, within the week called up and said, hey, I'm sorry about this whole thing with the Iron Man, but I have another job for you. Would you like to take over this series, which is probably not going to last because it's selling terribly? And that was the start of my run on Captain Marvel.
What do you have any?
Fired, man.
Do you have any anecdotes, any amusing anecdotes about working with Steve Gerber? Like, did you have anything to do with that Defenders run where he had just the random elf with a gun running through the pages?
Don't know what you're talking about, but I do have another story with Steve. When I first started working up at Marvel, they didn't have an art director, and they needed somebody to do sketches for covers for other people to draw, like John Buscema and Gil Kane. So I started working out cover sketches with Stan, and get the cover sketch up, and it would go off to another artist to pencil. Steve Gerber was also working at the office at that time, and he was doing proofreading. This is before he started writing. This is both of us had really just started. And Steve was suffering from narcolepsy at that point. He would fall asleep in the middle of the day, and he had the cubicle next to me. And we sort of worked out a thing really quickly. If I found him sleeping, I would wake him up. And but occasionally I would hear this crash, and I would come over and find Steve laid on the floor, fast asleep. He really had a bad case of it at that point. He got over it, of course, and went on and became a very successful writer up at Marvel.
Right.
Very good writer, too.
When did you start filling in some of the blanks with Thanos? Obviously, you're really attached to the character. I think he's one of your strongest characters that you revisited over the years alongside Warlock, and I think the thing that defines Thanos most is his glaring polarizations, his contradictions with his personality, in that he is in love with the manifestation of death herself, and yet he also has a benevolent streak whenever he has to team up with heroes, which he tends to do reluctantly often. And I think that always is that was always what set him above your common supervillain. You know, how long did it take you to build that kind of majestic feel with that character?
Well, somewhere along the line, I realized that contradiction is a very important facet inside personality. And with Thanos, I wanted somebody who had all the dark things going on inside of him that everybody has within them, but they're probably not going to admit it. But he acts upon these dark urges and has no compunction about doing so. Basically, I wanted a character who would really kick ass, but at the same time had more than just this one-dimensional character about him. As far as his working with other superheroes, I don't think it's so much benevolence as much as it is pragmatism. I do believe the only two characters that he ever really had any emotional ties to would be Gamora and Warlock, for two different reasons. You know, he raised Gamora, and Warlock was the one person who ever trusted him.
I think when Gamora was attacked in that spaceport, and he took her and replaced the parts that were ravaged enough that they had to be replaced with bionic parts, if I recall. I'm going total comic book geek here for a second. But I think that was a benevolent act, that he not only fixed Gamora up after her brutal attack, but he also taught her how to defend herself in such a way that she eventually surpassed his abilities in physical combat. But it just is so obvious that you've had so much fun with that character. And did you ever think that he would be such a crucial facet of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because back in the mid-'90s, when the Infinity comics were most important in my mind, I never anticipated that Thanos would be on the big screen, much less a consistently important character. You know, I just didn't think Hollywood would ever accept that character, and here we are. Did you ever think it would get to this point?
No, I always thought he was just too esoteric to become as popular as he has. In some ways, it's been kind of a burden to bear, because he was the first character I ever created, and I've not done anything since that has come anywhere near as him in popularity. So in some ways, I have to sort of look at my career as starting out big and going downhill ever since.
I would never say that, no. But you know, there are other characters that you had a great success with, or one would imagine, like Adam Warlock, who eventually ascended from just an artificial humanoid birthed from a cocoon. He eventually ascended to godhood as a sort of messianic figure in charge of his own counter-Earth, which was a fascinating story arc in itself. You were initially uncomfortable about that arc, correct?
Well, I had been doing Captain Marvel before that, and I like to take characters on journeys where they change. And Captain Marvel, I took from a warrior and turned him into sort of this quasi-religious bully man in a lot of ways. And so when I came to Warlock, and Roy told me to do whatever I wanted with him, I realized that I was starting off with a holy man to begin with, and I had to take him someplace else. And so I decided that my own mental state was a bit of a mess at that point, so why not make him a paranoid schizophrenic with suicidal tendencies?
Works for me.
Yeah, worked for the sales, too. Worked out pretty well.
And jumping ahead just for a moment, the Infinity Gems themselves, I guess they call them the stones in the movies,
Yes.
they were actually appropriated for some of the more major Marvel characters here in the last few years that went under the name the Illuminati. That consisted of Captain America, I think, Black Panther, Iron Man, Professor Xavier, and they actually got to use the Infinity Gems, which, for those uninitiated, would allow someone to hold dominion over areas such as the mind, the soul, reality itself, time, space, and I think there may be one more, but that may have been retconned. But the point is, other people have had mixed results in using those objects of power. How did you feel about that run personally? Did you feel that they did it properly? Because I think Captain America ended up destroying the gems outright after the incursion storyline.
Okay, they were doing the Infinity books up, the Infinity comic book series up at Marvel when I first came back there this last time, and I did read through a couple of them, and then it became very apparent that Marvel wanted me doing something outside their universe. They didn't want me working in their Marvel universe. So I just stopped reading what they have been doing on Thanos. I've read very little of the other Thanos stories. Like I said, the first couple issues of Infinity, I think I read the Thor series that Dan Jurgens wrote, a couple other little things way back when, but I haven't seen any of the new stuff. I just tend to avoid it because we had this other universe that I was supposedly operating out of, and it just worked out that way.
I will say that the Thanos, I believe it was the Thanos Chronicles that showed Thanos as a young boy when he first met Death, and she was a little girl too, or embodying a little girl. It did not feel right. It felt like non-canon compared to what you had built up to that point. And I do believe it was written by someone else, possibly Jeff Lemire. And while it was interesting, it held my attention. It just didn't feel like it fit in that puzzle that you had so elaborately constructed. Something else that was interesting is that you had this habit occasionally of entering these esoteric quotes from Nietzsche and maybe Jean-Paul Sartre into the beginnings of your comics to kind of present a theme, and you did it in a very eloquent way. So I give you thumbs up for that as well. I think there was one during the Count Abyss storyline that you alluded to a Nietzsche quote, and that was very cool stuff. You did not just have success at Marvel, though. Let's talk about Batman and A Death in the Family. Whose idea was it for the Jason Todd Robbins fate to be put up to a vote? How did you feel about that if it was not your idea?
Okay, well, it was sort of my idea. This is a bit of a story, though. I started working with Denny O'Neil on the Batman stories, and I never really thought Robin was a good idea. Any kid's sidekick was a good idea. And with Robin, here's this guy all dressed in blacks and grays, and he's sending this kid out in primary colors. It almost seemed like he was sending them out as a target. So it always struck me as being child endangerment, if not abuse. So I always left Robin out of the stories, and eventually Denny said, hey, you got to start putting him in at least one, and then later on we put him in the Batman the Cult series. But the reason I decided to, everybody decided to kill off Robin, is the fact that that particular Robin, he wasn't Dick Grayson, Jason Todd or something his name was.
Dick Grayson?
Popular.
Yeah.
He wasn't all that popular, and actually, just before this project occurred, DC had this idea they were going to do an age book, and they asked people to suggest a character who could get AIDS. So I stuffed the box with Robins, hoping I could get rid of him that way. As it turned out, it was Jimmy Olsen who ended up getting voted to get AIDS. But then they found out that the actor who in the Steve Reeves, not Steve Reeves, George Reeves, Christopher Reeves, Superman, that that particular actor was gay, and so they abandoned that idea. And then Denny came up with the idea of the call-in, and I had been lobbying to get rid of Robin up until that point, and he said, "Hey, that's great. We'll use Robin on this, and we'll do a call-in, and fans can decide whether he lives or dies." I always knew he was going to die. Sorry, but I know what kind of ghouls my fans are. So I decided that, we'll do the two endings in that. And what I was surprised by is how close it was. It was only like 72 votes difference between life and death on him. That was like an insignificant amount. There was over 10,000 votes. So the first book came out, and they started doing promotions on it, and Denny got on all the morning talk shows. He was on Good Morning America, what have you, back then. And at the time, I was a little put off by the fact that, he didn't mention either Jim Otero. It was all, I decided this, and I decided that. And I said, okay, that's his job. He's the editor. But when the final book came out, licensing all of a sudden discovered that they had all these lunch boxes and pajamas with Robin on them. And so the shit hit the fan. And the next thing I knew, I was out at DC because suddenly this is all my fault.
This is a recurring theme throughout your career, isn't it? You're that you always
sometimes
seem to...
I just walk into it.
Yeah.
Without even knowing it was there.
Well, how long did it take for them to get Tim Drake to replace Jason Todd as the new Robin?
Oh, it was pretty quick. They really wanted to sell those pajamas and lunch boxes, and so I think within a couple months. I mean, I was gone by then, and somebody else was writing the book. But as I recall, it was fairly quick.
Something else about Batman that I always thought. I always felt that it didn't make sense for him to be a member of the Justice League who fight primarily in the daylight. I mean, let's keep him in the shadows. I always thought that was against type for him, that he would ever go out in the daylight. His whole allure is that he fights crime in the dead of night they can't see him. He has the darkness to his advantage. Why is he charging into danger in the middle of the day where people can possibly see him better, right?
Yeah, and he's nowhere near as powerful as the others, but he is also a master manipulator and a pragmatist. If you have all these powerful tools, why not use them? And there have been a few writers along the line that have kept him more into the background, more the manipulator and the schemer than the guy going out there and kicking tail, and usually letting Superman or John Jones do that. But, every book, every series is a metamorphosis every time. It metamorphosizes every time there's a new writer coming on. And, you have literally about 30 or 40 different Justice Leagues out there in the back issue bins. There's been a lot of variations on that group and every other.
Mm-hmm. Hawkman. How much involvement have you had with that character? You actually tried your very best to make him a halfway presentable character, in that his convoluted backstory was kind of simplified, right? Or at least updated to the most sensible approach it could possibly be for someone with as convoluted a backstory as he has. I mean, what kind of work did that take to do that? Picking up where we left off there for that brief stutter, Hawkman with the convoluted backstory. Now you had your time in the sun with this character, and you did your best to revamp him in the most sensible way possible. What was it like retconning that madness that is his backstory?
There was one point where Dan DeVille wanted me to revamp the character entirely, and that one Hawkman story I had was the beginning of it. But one of the things up at DC and Dan is that things change on almost a daily basis in the way they were going back at that point. And I believe we got that one story that I penciled and wrote, and then they decided they were going to kill him off. Kill him and Hawkgirl off. I have no idea why, and I never did see what happened with it. But they had a very different way of managing things up there than I was used to. A lot of things. I started a number of different jobs. I started a Captain Marvel Shazam story. I had 6 pages done, and that job got shelved right in the middle of it. They decided the movie was coming out any moment at that point, and it was best not to have a strange Captain Marvel running around. Of course, we're still waiting on that Captain Marvel movie, but...
I thought Drew Carey owned the rights to that character.
I believe it's Michael Uslan who's got the rights on it.
Really?
And they keep talking about doing one, but I haven't seen it yet. In fact, I saw Mike Uslan 2 months ago, and it hadn't started at this point. The only thing I ever hear is they're going to use The Rock as Black Adam. Mm. And it looks like the part. I just hope they get it made before The Rock turns old and gray.
Oh, The Rock as as Shazam? Is that what you're saying?
No, he was going to be Black Adam.
Oh, yeah, okay. One criticism that I've often thrown at comic books in general, the industry, is they hit the reset button so quickly, like they almost, it's like they panic. They can't let anything like ride out on its own. They've always got to hit that reset button every few years, and I'm talking about from Crisis on Infinite Earths over to 0 Hour, Flashpoint, the Ultimates line, which may or may not have been a reset. I'm not sure, but do you think that is good for the overall creativity of the writers, or do you think that it's a detriment because of the confusion it might create in the marketplace?
I would lean toward the detriment. It had a lot to do with meeting quarterly expectations. The art of writing a story has sort of been supplemented by whatever event will boost the sales at any given time. That's why you have all these crossovers and that. And I feel guilty because, I sort of started one of the first ones with the Infinity Gauntlet, and it's sort of gotten out of hand completely at this point. I've worked on a couple of them since then, The Peripheral Edge, and found them very confusing to deal with, and when I sat down and read them afterwards, they made no sense. Things like conflict and what have you, Countdown and what have you over at DC, it just made no sense most of the time.
Now, you were fired from DC in the aftermath when they wanted to sell the Robin lunchboxes and pajamas.
I wasn't fired. My work just dried up. There's a difference.
Okay.
Now,
but you went back to Marvel,
they didn't
right?
say you're gone. They just said, we got to get somebody working on this instead of you. I was doing Gilgamesh, a series called Gilgamesh at the time, which the agreement had been that I would just do it, and when I had it done, they'd print it. And suddenly they scheduled it, and as soon as the Batman Robin Death in the Family thing, they scheduled it, and I had to get that done so I could do Batman. And so there's it was just a little weird things. And then there was no work after I got done with Gilgamesh. So I went back over to Marvel, and we ended up doing the Infinity Gauntlet over there. So it worked out. Worked out fine for me.
And was it when you went back to Marvel that you started the Shang-Chi character?
Oh, no, Shang-Chi was very early on. I was doing Captain Marvel at the time that we did Shang-Chi.
Really?
Yes.
And what is the future of that? Is that to be a franchise or anything, or is that just dead in the water?
Somebody bought the film rights to it. I understand Steve Englehart did some kind of script for somebody for it. What happens with Shang-Chi up at Marvel Comics, I haven't got any idea. I really have no connection with Marvel Comics anymore.
Mm-hmm. You also did some time on the Silver Surfer in the beginning of the 90s, right?
Yes, that was directly after the Death in the Family thing. I went over to Marvel, and they said, how would you like to do the Silver Surfer? And the Perm Letter group had just taken over Marvel at that point, and they wanted to squeeze every cent that they could out of their fans. And so anything that sold got another book coming out, a spin-off book from it. I think every X-Men had his own book at this point. At that time. And so the Surfer sold well, and they said, let's do something more with Thanos, and so we did the Thanos quest, and that sold well. So the next thing we had was the Infinity Gauntlet and the War and the Crusade after that.
Yeah, we definitely got to talk more about the Infinity Gauntlet and everything, because, I mean, that's just like, that's the masterpiece. That's the magnum opus in my eyes. But with Silver Surfer, you also did a lot in upping that character's credibility, I think. From what I remember, though, there was a character in that that era of the Silver Surfer during the Homecoming series, I believe. The character, the Great One, who wandered the cosmos and converted different planets who were in danger to brainwaves in order to preserve them. And he ran into a conflict with Silver Surfer because he did that to Zen-La. And do you remember this? This was your character, right? The Great One?
This one rings no bell with me. You may be mixing me up with somebody else on that.
Huh.
It could just also be something I've forgotten.
I always thought that character's potential was never fully realized because he was just one and done. I don't think he ever made another appearance in any comic, but maybe I am mixing it up there. But what?
It may be me also. I've come across covers that I don't remember drawing, but there's my name on them. So, it's been 45 years I've been doing this.
Wow, that is unbelievable that it's been that long. Where does the time go? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel that every time I get up in the morning.
Let's talk about Adam Warlock a little bit more, because I think I may prefer this character a little bit more to Thanos. He has had a very storied past, and what I've really enjoyed the most about this character is his search for what it means to be, I don't know, what it means to have emotion. He seeks humanity, even though he's directly apart from it always, whether he's an artificial being known as him, or when he ascends to godhood later on and makes the most horrible choices in those who wear the Infinity Gems, and through the eyes of a god, it makes total sense why he chose them. And he second guesses himself after he has relinquished godhood and scattered the Infinity Gems. And I just thought that was such an amazing way to present that dilemma of godhood, because it's almost like an acid trip where things make total sense at the time, but you start to forget it later, right?
Well, we're all human. We all have our doubts, and we second guess ourselves on a daily basis. I'm pretty sure, at least most people do. Some sociopaths who are sure they're on the right path all the time, but everybody else, I think, has her doubts.
Yeah. And I noticed that you've also returned to Pip the Troll, Moondragon, and Gamora just as much as Thanos and Adam Warlock over the years. What is it about this motley crew that keeps bringing you back? They're reliable hands for telling whatever story you might have to tell. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of chemistry between them as characters, right?
Well, they're old friends. I mean, I worked on the Infinity Watch for a couple of years there, I believe. So that particular group, like my second family. If I need a character, I'll look at them to see if they work before I go grab somebody else out of the Marvel bullpen, because I don't have to go and do a lot of research to find out what, say, like Professor Xavier can do. I know what Moondragon can do, so I'll use her instead. It's basically laziness on my part. What can I tell you?
And then after the Infinity Gauntlet saw Thanos trying to achieve supremacy over the cosmos in order to win the favor of death, right? And another interesting twist was when she scorned him after he cut the universe's population in half. That was a great touch. And I think, if I'm not reading too much into it, that it's because, and she even says as much later, that it was unnecessary because she is death. She's got that handled, right? So he was just overcompensating.
Well, also, there was a TV show called Cheers, and it was about Sam and the bartender and some waitress, their romance. And once they climaxed their romance and it became, they became domestic, the show lost its interest, and they immediately got rid of Shelley Long, who was the waitress in it. I realized that the same thing had to hold true for Thanos. If you have a very happy relationship, who wants to read that? You want to read conflict. People who come here to see problems being solved, not domestic bliss. Domestic bliss doesn't sell.
And because you couldn't go back to the Thanos well every time as the big baddie, you moved on to Infinity War with Magus, who was a dark part of Adam Warlock's persona, and you drove it even further with the Goddess, who was the feminine side of Warlock. And so we almost have this id, ego, and super ego battle playing out, right? Was that intended?
Yes. She was going to be the religious icon of the grouping. I mean, she was Warlock's better half in more ways than one. But she was so good that she became a menace because her beliefs drove her to desires that were just as deadly as Thanos's or the Magus's. So she was kind of fun to do in that regard. That was kind of an interesting series to work on, just because of the religious aspect of it. Had to go through at one point and figure out what religion, if any, that each character had. And what was interesting is we got down to the end of categorizing it and realized that we didn't have one Jewish character inside Marvel Comics, and all the guys who had started up Marvel were all Jewish. So in desperation, they decided that Sasquatch, because he was from Poland, was Jewish. I always found that kind of amusing, that we had to go to those lengths to work things out.
And I think that Infinity Watch was actually one of my favorite series. I was saddened to hear that it ended when it did, with everything just up in the air. What were the plans set in motion that never seemed to get resolved? With Gamora was stripped of the time gem. I think by Adam Warlock, when they were living on Mole Man's Island, and Maxim inherited the time gem, and somebody kept seeing flashes of Maxim destroying Adam Warlock or killing him. What was to become of that? Did that ever get wrapped up?
You know, I started writing these novels around at that time, and this other writer took over for me. And I left him with a number of things to tie off. And we talked about it at the time. And the sequence you were talking about was Gamora was having visions of Warlock being killed by Maxam, so she was never very friendly toward Maxam. I didn't know that he eventually got the time gem. I don't tend to read books that I get off of, just because, it never goes where you want it to. So I figured I'm not going to be a backseat driver with any other writer. So I tend to avoid that. So I didn't know that some of that happened. I think I had this romance that Warlock was getting involved with because he had a magic potion that caused him to fall in love with this woman from another dimension whose name escapes me.
Was it Maya? It was Maya, right?
It might have been Maya, yes. I remember Count Abyss was the one who sort of set this thing up inadvertently.
That was definitely Maya, and she ended up marrying Dark Lore, I think, just as an arranged marriage, and they learned to love each other.
Oh, so that's how that one ended up. Okay, that's interesting.
I'm pretty sure that she ended up marrying Dark Lore, which is another character I wish I had seen again. Very cool. The wizard type guy, let's see, Thanos' redemption came way later. Like, you probably left and returned to Marvel several times in between that time frame, but I just want to say that one of the best lines that showcases the dynamics between Thanos and Death took place in Thanos' redemption. Now, did you write that, or was it Jeff Lemire?
Thanos' redemption. Seems like I did one book called called Redemption. Is that the one where he decides he was going to be a hero?
He teamed up with Galactus, I think, to battle the Hunger. An entity called the Hunger.
That was mine. I
that was
that one. It had a different name when they reprinted it.
Oh, okay. I hope I'm not confusing them, because there were several the last few years. But I think it also involved Star-Lord and Guardian from the Kree emerging from their own cocoons in that prison in space, unless I'm crossing two different series. But Death appears to Thanos when he goes to pray at this installation in space. And she says to him, when he's pouting, I guess, "I have always loved you, Thanos of Titan. I am worth pursuing." And it's like, and he smiles after she leaves him, and that was just incredible. That was a great way to kind of tie that issue off. Kind of put it to bed in a way. You wait forever to read her say that, and never expecting it, and then she does. And I can't remember if you wrote that or if someone else.
I don't think I did.
You wish you did?
I don't think I did.
Oh. Do you
I
feel that that's
have her saying that she loves him?
Do you feel that that's out of character for her to say that, or that it's earned?
It's somebody else's story, so it's not for me to say that it's out of character. I wouldn't have done it. But,
Okay.
Once you work for hire, you create something, you have to just sort of suck it up when you have Thanos fighting Kazar a month or so after you've left. So, different writers do different things, and so I was kind of glad that when Marvel decided that they didn't want me working on their titles, and I had my own little universe over here at Marvel, so I had my own consistency without having to explain away really wild things that somebody else did that I wouldn't have done.
Now we'll get to that and talk about, go into it as much or as little as you want to. But you mentioned your novels. Now, I actually didn't know that you had co-written 4 novels with your wife, Dana.
Ex-wife at this point, Dinah
Ex-wife.
Gruzinis.
I wasn't sure. Among Mad Men, Lady L, Thinning the Predators, and Pawns. I didn't know this, but I've actually been reading Lasgood's Boys, one of your most recent ones, and I wasn't sure what to make of it at first until I got on board with it originated from an old Captain Comet series, or Hardcore Station, I believe it was called, that you used to work on. Was it for DC or Marvel?
It was DC. It was a creator-owned thing that I did for DC involving their universe. It was a short-lived 6-issue miniseries. It was a project I always really liked, but they had a panel of 3 editors up there at the time, and they would review everything. You weren't getting it just from one person, so there was a lot of stuff added on to the comic series that just didn't work after as I started working on it, and I realized the whole thing was falling apart even as we were working on it. But I always loved that concept, and I loved the Hardcore Station, the satellite in space, and the laissez-faire, rampaging capitalism. So I've been doing a series of novels called the Hardcore Station novels. I've got 2 of them out at this point. There's Lasgood's Boys, and there's Hardcore Mind Games, which is actually a prequel to Lasgood's Boys. And I'm working on a 3rd one right now, which is untitled, and there'll be a 4th one, which will conclude the whole story.
Interesting. And what would you say it's about? It's about I mean, a space station, obviously, right? It's about conflicts in space. Is it space opera? Would you call it, or
space opera? It's basically, as the story starts off, Earth and about 1,000 other planets are under the domain of something called Omni Ever Incorporated, which is run by a group of aliens which are basically sentient vegetables or plants. The derogatory nickname for them among the populace is they're weeds. And these are the best salesmen, best corporate honchos that you ever want to see. They just take over, they come to Earth, and they team up with North Korea in the story, and before you know it, North Korea is the financial powerhouse of the world. And this one South Korean entrepreneur realizes that mankind is just not going to beat them on the level that we are at this point, and so he hires a geneticist to create a son for him whose DNA would be so hyped up that he would be able to take on the weeds and conquer them. The plan sort of goes awry when Lasgood, who is the biologist, cooks up 2 other kids as test groups or samples for, and when the kids all grow up, they start heading toward each other with mayhem in their eyes. The story is sort of about, are they going to kill each other off, or are they going to actually do any good?
Excellent.
And there's a telepath that comes into the story too from the Hardcore Mind Games. So it develops. It kind of snowballs and keeps developing as the novels will go on. But we got 2 of them out there right now. You can get them on Amazon. I'm going to wait until I get the 3rd one done and then see about finding myself a hardcover publisher. I'll probably go back and rework these things. That's sort of what you can do these days with online novels. Get the basis out there and then go back and rework it a little bit and then put it out there as a package in the book later on.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's get to the crux of it here, and I'm going to let you expound at length, or as briefly or as long as you want to, on what exactly happened with Marvel now that you have effectively abandoned it, but or quit the any future work on their lines because of editorial short-sightedness, shall we say. Basically, someone got the go-ahead, the clearance to write a series equal to yours, and that's not you don't dispute them so much as the editor not catching it, right?
Um,
Is that fair?
it's always been a case where if there's a job in progress, another writer comes along with a story that's similar. He has to go back and rework his story to avoid the conflict. Apparently didn't happen this time. I found out about it, asked them to correct it. They dug in. There's always conflict between editors and creative types. I'm tired of it. So I'm in good relationship with Marvel Entertainment. It's just Marvel Editorial and I are just not going to work together anymore because, it's time to move on to doing something else.
I can hear it in your voice that this was a very hard decision to make. You have spent so much energy and planning and love that you have put into these characters, and I can really understand your frustration. Anybody with any empathy could understand the situation and how you would have felt knowing that this was allowed to happen, and you've stressed that you have no ill will towards the other person developing the other series with Thanos that is
no, Donnie Gates and I have talked. He had no idea that was going on, and he's a good writer, so I have no ill feelings for him. I mean, it's just synchronicity; it happens.
Right.
It's the editor's job to make sure that doesn't happen. Didn't happen this time.
Am I to understand though?
Not the way I would have liked to have my time at Marvel in, but it is a business, and everything comes to an end eventually. So moving on and going off to do some other things now.
Right. Well, am I to understand, though, that everything that you put into this new Thanos series, it will be released as well as Donnie Gates's? They will both see publication, is that correct?
Well, Donnie's is coming out now. Thanos 13 is the beginning of his story. I haven't read it. I'm still avoiding reading these things, so I don't know how far along. So I don't really want to get into any particulars on this because I don't want to ruin his story, and anyone who reads my story, I don't want to tell them all the stuff to it either. So it's just a matter of I've lost track of what the original question was.
I don't either. But, man, I really feel for you being in this situation, and you do deserve better, and I don't think there are too many people who would say otherwise, really. You've told us some incredible stories over the years, and on top of that, I have had the pleasure of sharing my enjoyment with you of them, and you have enlightened me with, regaled me with stories of your time working on them. The name of the series in question was Infinity Siblings, and it involved Thanos and Eros, brothers at odds with each other, right?
That's the first of the 3 graphic novels. Alan Davis is in the middle of penciling up the second one at this point, which is going to be called Thanos and Infinity Conflict. And the last book is Thanos and Infinity Ending. So, to my knowledge, they're all supposed to be coming out still. I haven't heard anything differently, so I think we can expect them as Alan finishes the art and they get inked and colored up. I'm still working with an editor up at Marvel, Sarah Brownhard or something. I'm sorry, I'm going to blow her name there, the last name, but she's quite professional, and we're working quite well together on doing the edits and the last-minute changes and what have you on it as we go along. So it should come out as far as I know.
Excellent. do you plan to work with DC more in the future, or maybe another comic press?
I'm doing some work with Ominous Press. I'm doing an art of book for them. They have a new series of books called the Black Books, I think it's called, and I'm just about to start in on assembling that through InDesign, and that will be coming out through them. And I have a few other areas in the fire. Nothing to announce at this point. Basically, what I'm doing is spending most of my time working on the novels at this point. And there's going to be the personal appearance things that are going to eat up a lot of time in the next year or so.
I don't know why you didn't write more novels. You definitely have the head for it.
Well, I like drawing. I liked drawing. I don't do it anymore because I injured my hand, but I always was more the visual storyteller, but I enjoy spinning the yarn. We were back in the caveman days. I'd be the guy who doesn't do all the hunting all that well, or not very good at gathering berries, but they let me stay around because I tell them nice stories around the campfire at night.
I'll bet. One last question. I just have to know, I don't remember whether it was the Infinity Relativity or Infinity Finale. There was a point where Adam Warlock went beyond the edges of the known universe to speak with, I believe, God, or an aspect of God called the One Above All. And they brokered some deal at the end of that series, and there was this implication that Adam might be assuming some of his responsibilities, the One Above All. And he hinted at some reason that Warlock would want to do this, even though he refused at first. Do you remember what that was, or were you just on fire to tell the story and you don't remember?
Oh, I remember. The last page answers your question. If you go back and see that particular Adam Warlock, who was from another dimension, from the previous graphic novel, he becomes our dimension's living tribunal. He replaces the living tribunal. That was the deal he made with God.
That's amazing. I can't believe I forgot that. you
Yeah,
also...
Full last page there.
Okay. I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, I've got it here somewhere. You even managed to make Terrax the Tamer a sympathetic character with cosmic powers, which, my hat's off to you. This has been a really...
I didn't write cosmic powers. That was Ron Mars.
Oops, okay. Well...
There's a lot of books out there.
I know this has been a bit of a suck-up interview, but I've really enjoyed this, and are there any last parting words you'd like to offer?
Looking forward to the Infinity War next year. Had a great time down on the set. They were very forthcoming about what they were doing with my character, and I'm just... My socks were blown off by what they showed me and what they told me. So, like everybody else, I'm chafing at the bit and salivating, waiting for May.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Jim. And if there's ever anything that I can help promote, put the word out about on my little hamlet of a show, I would be more than glad to. More than anything, though, I thank you for taking this hour to talk to a complete stranger who now has your phone number, but it's cool. Don't worry.
Oh, God, I can block calls. I have a cell phone.
All right. I thank you so much for your time, sir, and best of luck with whatever you decide to do.
All right, thank you.
All right.
And you
You're all fucking autistic.